this was sent my way. Shout out to you guys who send me videos and articles and stuff. Like, again, I don't always respond to the emails, but I see them. I just get really busy, so I don't always have time to respond. But this was sent my way. So apparently there are multiple people that are running independent and third party for 2024. I've interviewed, I think, three independent candidates for president on this show. I've also interviewed third party candidates as well. And now apparently PSL, now this is the Party for Socialist Liberation, they are running candidates for president, Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia for 2024. I'm going to start off by showing their announcement video. Then we're going to take a look at the website, and then we're going to talk about one of the concerns that I do have with PSL, and that is going to be ballot access, but they may have a plan. I can try to get Claudia and Karina on the show to hear from them as well. But let's start off with their campaign announcement. So let's dive in.
Does it ever feel like the political system is working against us? Like regardless of who we vote for, the outcome is always the same? We're told this country is a democracy, but more and more it feels like a corporate regime. No matter which party is in power, only the rich ever come up on top. Today, the richest 1% own more wealth than the bottom 90% of Americans combined.
On top of that, heat waves, floods, and hurricanes are becoming a regular occurrence. Artificial intelligence is threatening to replace millions of jobs, and the threat of World War III is more serious than ever. Humanity is facing nothing short of an existential crisis, and what do the two parties offer us? Culture wars meant to divide us, and breadcrumbs disguised as solutions that come nowhere near meeting the scale of the problem.
Let's just say what we all know deep inside. Career politicians and real estate moguls are never going to save us. Corporate America has two parties. Shouldn't the working class have at least one?
So what I would have said here, let me go back just a little bit, because notice when they mention,
Let's just say what we all know deep inside. Career politicians.
So they show Kamala Harris, right?
Real estate moguls are never going to save us.
And then real estate moguls, they show Donald Trump. So what they're doing here is, I think this is a good idea. What they're doing here is they're showing you that obviously the career politicians have failed the people. That's a no-brainer, right? But they're also showing you that even an outsider like Donald Trump, meaning Donald Trump was a political outsider, right? He was not a politician. Even an outsider who was a businessman, real estate mogul, who people thought would come in and would be there for the people, even they still sell out the people. Remember, Donald Trump chose to give those tax breaks to corporations, but then Joe Biden continued some of Donald Trump's tax breaks. So what she's showing you is, or what they are showing you is that we've had the career politicians, we've had the political outsiders, we've had both now from two different parties, but unfortunately, the people are still suffering. So I thought that that was smart. Now, what I would have, well, let me go to this part here.
Corporate America has two parties.
That part right there. Corporate America has two parties. I would have said corporate America has one corporate party. I wouldn't even have called them two, because the thing is like, when you make the distinctions there of Donald Trump and the distinction of Kamala Harris, then you tie it back together and show it's just one corporate party. That's what I would have said. But this is good so far. Let me go back. There we go.
Corporate America has two parties. Shouldn't the working class have at least one? I am Claudia de la Cruz.
And I'm Karina Garcia.
And we're running for the President and Vice President of the United States on the ticket of the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
We're not career politicians, and we don't have billionaire friends. We're educators, community organizers, and mothers.
You don't need to tell us that the working class makes this country run. I'm from the South Bronx, and we know what hard work looks like.
So they're they're working class, right? So they're not, they're not PMCs, professional managerial class. She's from the South Bronx. Now I'm gonna go ahead and say this now, though, because we had a Bronx person. We had, AOC she also said she was from the Bronx, and we know like how that turned out, right? But this is different. This is different. So far, the people that I've interviewed that are running for office, well, I haven't interviewed them yet, but Jasmine Sullivan, working class, right? And these two, I haven't interviewed them yet, but they're a part of the working class. So they know the struggle of everyday people. I think that's important. You just go back here.
You don't need to tell us that the working class makes this country run. I'm from the South Bronx, and we know what hard work looks like.
I know this country wouldn't last a day without the working class. So isn't it about time that we take charge?
This campaign is for all of us living paycheck to paycheck or working multiple jobs. For all of us who are sick of watching the rich get richer while we can't even pay our rent.
We don't just want to tax the billionaires. We want them out of power entirely. We need to.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point. I like that. Hold on, let me see.
But we can't even pay our rent.
We don't just want to tax the billionaires. We want them out of power entirely.
That part right there. Because a lot of politicians right now that are running are saying, oh, we're going to tax the rich. The rich need to pay their fair share, right? Notice they don't want to say the word billionaires. Like that seems to be taboo now all of a sudden. But what she's saying here is like, we don't want to just tax the billionaires. We want them out of office entirely. And I think people need to continue to say that. I think that needs to be, or want them out of power entirely. I think that needs to be a ongoing message. And I know Bernie Sanders said that back in the day, but Bernie doesn't say that anymore. So you have to continue to say that message.
We need to seize big pharma, seize big tech, seize the big banks instead of letting them run our government. We need an economy that puts the people before profit, an economy built to generate prosperity for everyone, not just a handful of billionaires.
This campaign is not a one-time thing. We're running to build a political organization that finally gives voice to the working people of this country. It's time.
So it sounds like they're running on building a movement, right? So they said it's not a one-time thing. And I've heard of Claudia before.
Not a one-time thing. We're running to build a political organization that finally gives voice to the working people of this country. It's time to stop going around in circles while the elites change places every 4 years. We think this country deserves a better option, a socialist option.
So Claudia and Karina, they are socialists. They are running 2024 for president and vice president. I thought they did a good job there with the advertisement, and I want to show you what their platform looks like. What did I do? Here it is. Let me show you their platform, because this is the piece, like, again, like, especially like when I interview candidates, I really like to, at some point, talk about their platform. So one of the first things that I see on the list: end capitalism before it ends us. Seize the biggest 100 corporations, create a new economy for the people. Now, if you click here, it talks about the largest corporations in America should be seized from their billionaire owners and turned into public property. So this piece here is important because oftentimes I've looked at a lot of platforms, right? I've interviewed a lot of candidates. Oftentimes they'll tell you what they want to do, but they don't tell you how it should be done. So one thing I will say that I do applaud them for is they're telling you how it should be done. It should be turned into public property. I'm not going to read all of this because it's a lot here, but you guys can go through it. And then overthrow the dictatorship of the rich, build a democracy that serves the working class. And if you click on here, it says the U.S. needs a new system of government to replace the current one designed to maintain the dictatorship of the billionaires over everyone else. The main tools of the ultra rich used to enforce this dictatorship would be abolished. This includes the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the banker-controlled Federal Reserve. So one of the things they're doing that I think is a little bit different, they're calling out the banks. That's a big one. That's huge, right? So they're starting with the corruption and the money. That can resonate with a lot of people. The FBI and the NSA would be disbanded, and mass incarceration would be replaced by a justice system aimed at rehabilitation and reintegration into the community. The median income for a person in the US is $31,000, but there is currently not a single member of Congress who has to experience this reality. That's true. Workers are fully capable of making the decisions and running the government. Workers already run everything else. With workers in charge, the rights of all people will finally be respected. And then they go into demand full equality for LGBTQ people in all areas of society, and national legislation banning discrimination at the workplace and in all public and private institutions. You know, it's crazy that in 2023, we still have to talk about ending discrimination in the workplace. Native sovereignty and self-determination should be fully recognized, and treaty rights should be honored. So that's a big one for those of you that are watching that are a part of the indigenous community. We want to turn the social order upside down and topple those who have all the money and power, but do none of the work. I want to talk about what they just said here about the workers, how we pretty much run everything. Think about it, guys. If it wasn't for the workers, would these billionaires exist? And we don't have that much time. We don't have that much time before they do replace a lot of these jobs with AI, and they're not really going to need the workers so much anyway, at least for especially some of these tech gigs, if you know what I mean. So the thing to me is just that it reminds me when I still worked in higher ed, you know, it's a lot of the kudos would go towards the faculty, and some were nice, some were just assholes. I'm just keeping it real. But it's like what they failed to understand until the pandemic happened and a lot of people quit en masse is that it was actually the staff who kept things running. It's the administrative assistants, right? It's also the food service employees on campus, the janitors, right? The IT people, which everybody hates for some reason. I never figured out why people were so mean to IT because everybody hates IT until your computer stopped working. And then all of a sudden you need IT. So you might want to be nice to those people. I'm just saying, but you can't do it without the workers. You really can't. So we have more power than we realize. We just have to get people to come together in the rule of money and lock up the corrupt elite. Oh, people are speaking my language when they say in the rule of money. I'm just saying. I like that. So one of the things they say here, all Wall Street bailouts would end immediately. Similarly, millionaires and billionaires should no longer be allowed to buy elections through lavish donations. All campaigning should be publicly financed. So they're calling for public financing of elections. That's huge. Get the corporate money out. And different loopholes like super PACs that billionaires use to get around donation limits should be immediately closed. That's really good. They're talking about prosecuting wealthy people. They mentioned JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, of course, who banked with Jeffrey Epstein. I've talked about that before multiple times on the show. Cut the military budget by 90%. Peace, not war with China and Russia. Notice they gave an amount. See, this is the one where people, when I ask people, I said, would you reduce the military budget? A lot of times, most people say, well, most people I've interviewed, okay, say yes, but they said by 90%. They gave you a figure here, and I want to click on here and just show you what that looks like. The approximately $1 trillion that U.S. taxpayers spend every year on war should instead be spent to address the dire crisis facing working people. The price of key goods, especially gas, could be dramatically lowered if the suffocating economic sanctions the U.S. government imposes on countries around the world were lifted. Everybody needs to see this. And Eric, we can put the link to this in the chat too, so people can, they're heavily against, obviously, the new Cold War against China and Russia must end, along with associated aggression like the proxy war in Ukraine, massive military shipments to Taiwan, or any and all military build up against any targeted nation. This is huge. We demand the abolition of NATO military alliance and AFRICOM. Again, we're not going to go through all of it, but I'm reading the real big key points that I think you guys want to see. In the war on Black America, here we go. The struggle for Black freedom brought millions of people into the streets in 2020 in the most massive social movement in the U.S. history. The enormous uprising was an outraged response to the fact that a war has been waged on Black America from every foundation of the country, from slavery to segregation to systemic racism, including decades of neoliberalism and mass incarceration that have left the country even more unequal and segregated. Reparations and the rebuilding of Black communities are essential to fully address the consequences of this war. The seizure of the 100 largest corporations, many of which historically profited from slavery, will provide ample resources for cash payments, along with huge investments in services and infrastructure. So those of you in the chat who usually ask this question when we bring up reparations, but do they agree with cash payments? Yes. And they're thinking the corporations should pay for it, which actually makes sense because some of these corporations made a lot of money and built huge businesses off of the backs of slavery and Jim Crow. So that's a good point to bring up. So I knew some of you, I saw someone in the chat earlier said, no reparations, no vote. Well, there you go. There you go. They got that. And then defend women's rights. Full equality for LGBTQ people. Abortion should be available without restrictions and provided for free so that women have the right to control their own bodies. Now, this goes back to universal health care, because the thing is, if we did have universal health care, I would imagine that an abortion would be free, especially if it was a life or death situation where the mother's life was at risk, right? They talk about the Supreme Court. And then it says where did it go? Oh, okay. They said the Democrats had the opportunity to codify. They're talking about codifying Roe. The epidemic of violence against women must be addressed as a top priority of society. This can only be achieved through a comprehensive approach involving programs to help women leave abusive situations and into impunity for crimes against women, and cultural campaigns to uproot sexist attitudes. The Constitution must finally include a provision guaranteeing equal rights for women. That's crazy. That's not there. That's crazy. That is not there. And of course, we get into climate. Save the planet from capitalism. Woo! To deal with the disastrous effects of the climate crisis, society must urgently transform the way we produce energy, grow food, and move around the world. We jump down here. Fossil fuel corporations should immediately be taken over by the public and repurposed to generate renewable energy. Capitalist agriculture is enormously wasteful, especially when it comes to water resources. The vast land holdings and technological resources available to the agribusiness corporations would be seized and turned over to farmers who would implement a democratically determined plan to reorganize food production on a sustainable basis. Public transportation will be massively expanded with a fleet consisting entirely of electric vehicles, and the huge scale of this undertaking will ensure that no auto worker will lose their job. Massive infrastructure projects need to begin immediately to make society more resilient to the changing climate. So I think most of you know what I'm already going to say when I talk about what I did not see. And I'm going to go back up to the top just to double check something right here. I'm going to check the top too. This part right here. You guys know healthcare is a big one for me, right? That's a big one Sabby care about. As education as well. I noticed something here. It said quality healthcare, not universal healthcare. So I don't know if maybe they do agree with universal healthcare. I would like to interview them to talk to them about this. Maybe they do agree with universal healthcare, but what kind of threw me a little bit was quality healthcare. What does that mean? So that threw me. Yeah, I don't know what define quality. So I'm not sure about that. And that's a little odd to me that a socialist campaign doesn't mention universal health care. So that one did jump out to me. So there's that. And then there was another one here, jump down here, when they're talking about the median income for every person, and they talk about the new socialist system of government based on direct exercise of power by the workers, true democracy, and da-da-da. So I think, again, when they mention the median income for a person in the U.S. is $31,000, it's good that they put that. But what I also noticed is when we talk about a living wage, I didn't see a living wage. I didn't see increase the minimum wage. So those are two things that did stand out to me. And someone was mentioning in the chat, the jab. I didn't see anything about that either. Now, they just announced, sometimes people do make edits to the websites not too long after they've announced. They have just announced, so we'll have to just also keep that in mind. But they did have good things listed here, but not seeing universal health care was a big one. I kind of, that one, I'm gonna try not to look at the chat. Joe said red flags, Joe, in the face to go with it. I'm kind of surprised for a socialist campaign not to have that on the platform. So that was weird. Interesting. Now, there is an issue with PSL, and this was something that I did search for. So I searched to find out how many ballot access they have. So PSL, so I did look this up, PSL on the ballot in 13 states nationwide. But this goes back to 2012. Let me, it's here, hold on. This goes back to 2012. I could not find anything more recent. And I looked for hours. I looked for hours trying to find out how many states they have ballot access in, right? So what I found was 2012, they had 13 states. So let me show you the states. And according to this, in 2012, they had Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, Washington State, and Wisconsin. And now, the states that have a star or an asterisk next to them, like Colorado, Iowa, Utah, Wisconsin, it says here, in those states, the PSL has stand-in candidates because those states' ballot access requirements prohibit the names of Petalinzi and Yaro Asario from appearing. Again, this goes back to 2012, and that's who was running then. So it could be different today. But I'm assuming, like she said, we're building this organization. I'm assuming they have a plan to increase ballot access, just like Green Party has a plan to increase ballot access with Dr. West's campaign, just like they did with Jill Stein's campaign. I'm assuming that's part of the plan. I don't know until I interview them, because as it stands right now, I couldn't vote for them based off of this list here. Now, if there's someone in the chat that is a part of PSL, or you know more about this, please let me know, because this is the most recent I could find. And I looked at Ballotpedia and everything. Ballotpedia just redirected me back to the website. So just And FYI, if you guys know, or tell me on call in tonight if you know a little bit more, because I'm trying to find out if they had access in more states. But yeah, so those two young ladies, Claudia de la Cruz for president and Karina Garcia for vice president, they are running through PSL for 2024. The only thing I know about PSL, other than the socialist part, is someone did tell me that PSL is like DSA light. I don't know. I really don't. But maybe you guys can tell me more, okay? I do know also they seem to be pretty close with Answer Coalition. So